Welcome to PTI BetterGradesFast.com multimedia tutorials. This language arts session will be on direct and indirect speech. First, we will look at direct speech. Direct speech is known as that which a speaker actually says. In other words, if you were to write something word for word from the mouth of someone who said it, that will be considered direct speech. Let me show you an example. Martha said, "I love dogs." I love dogs, it are the actual words that came out of Martha's mouth. So they would be considered the direct quote. Now remember, when you are writing direct speech, the quote is not the only important part. You also need to remember your punctuation rules. Here we see certain pieces of punctuation being used that are particular for direct speech. Our inverted commas. Inverted commas are used mainly when writing direct speech, meaning whenever you need to write, whether in a letter, in a regular sentence, or in a composition, whenever you need to write any kind of direct quote, you need inverted commas. You also need a regular comma. Your regular comma comes after the verb of saying. In this case, the verb said. Other verbs of saying are told, requested, asked, demanded, shouted. Those are all verbs of saying because they all tell you the way someone says something. Therefore, you need the person who is speaking, the verb of saying, your comma, then after your comma, with a space in between, you need to have your open inverted commas, then your quote, the exact thing that the person said, then your end punctuation, which in this case is a full stop, a space, and then your closed inverted commas. Let's go through that again. First, you need the person who said the quote, the saying verb, your comma after your saying verb, a space, then your open inverted commas, your quote, which is exactly what the person said, your end punctuation, which is a full stop in this case, and your closed inverted commas, because the quote has ended there. This is the structure of any regular statement that has to be done in direct speech. What about if the person asks a question in direct speech? That changes your punctuation slightly. Let me show you how. Anna asked, "Is it raining?" In this case, what Anna said, also known as the quote, is a question. So we have the person who's speaking, your saying verb, which in this case is asked because it's a question, your comma is space, your open inverted commas, your quote, which has to begin with a capital letter, and instead of a full stop at the end, you now have a question mark. This is because what Anna is saying is a question. So you can no longer have a full stop to end your quote. You need a question mark now. You still need your end or closing inverted commas because the quote has ended. So you see the difference here. The sentence before, what Martha said, was a statement, so you had a full stop. What Anna said was a question, so you need a question mark. What about if someone shouts something? How is that going to change your punctuation? Let me show you. Daddy shouted, "Bring me my keys." Remember, this is direct speech. So this is actually what Daddy says. In this case, you do not have a full stop at the end. Neither do you have a question mark. You need an exclamation mark. You need an exclamation mark because the quote is shouted, meaning when someone is shouting, they are exclaiming something. So you need an exclamation mark. Let's see how this sentence goes in terms of structure. Daddy, the person who said the quote, the saying verb, in this case shouted, your comma, a space, your quote beginning with a capital letter, your quote being what Daddy said, every word, word by word, then an exclamation mark because he was shouting, and finally your closed inverted commas because it ends the quote that Daddy was making. These are three different types of direct speech sentences. Remember, they differ because they are saying, asking, and shouting. That therefore means that the kinds of quotes are different. In the first one, Martha is saying a regular statement, so you need a full stop at the end of your quote. In the second one, Anna is asking a question, so this time you need a question mark. In the third one, Daddy is shouting, so you need an exclamation mark when someone is shouting. This is the most common way of writing direct speech. However, direct speech can be changed, meaning your quote can come in front and the person speaking and the saying verb can come after. I will show you this with the first example. "I love dogs," said Martha, is the same thing as Martha said, "I love dogs." Same quote, same person, same same saying verb. However, when you change the order of the sentence, you also need to change the punctuation. In this case, when you put the quote in front, you will now have to begin with your open inverted commas because that's where your quote is beginning. With a capital letter, of course, you enter your quote. I love dogs, which was said by Martha. In this case, you cannot put a full stop as you did here because the sentence is not ending yet. Here, the sentence ended, so you needed a full stop. Here, it is not ending, so you need a comma. And then a space and your closed inverted commas because your quote is ending. Your sentence, however, has to be completed. Said, your saying verb, and the person who is speaking, Martha. Then you need your full stop because only after the word Martha is the sentence ending. Keep in mind the difference. Unlike the first example, where after the saying verb you had a comma, and at the end of the quote you had a full stop, in this case, at the end of the quote you have a comma because it is not the end of the sentence. A full stop is now after the person who said it because after the word Martha is now the end of the sentence. When you practice using this type of direct speech, you will get very accustomed and very comfortable with this type of punctuation. Keep in mind that there has to be a space between the commas and the open or the closed inverted commas. Your teacher needs to see the difference between the two pieces of punctuation. Do not put them over each other because it seems as though you may have been mistaken. Make sure that you can separate them easily. We can now move on to indirect speech. Indirect speech is also known as reported speech. This is the opposite of direct speech. Indirect speech is when someone tells someone else about something that was said. In other words, if you are writing in direct speech, you are not writing word for word what someone said. You are writing a report of what they said. In this case, you do not need inverted commas. Direct speech uses inverted commas because it gives you the exact quote from the person. Indirect speech, on the other hand, gives you a report of what the person said. Let me show you an example. In the first sentence, we have a direct speech example. I have good news, said Jill. The second sentence is the indirect or reported version of the first. Jill said that she had good news. You see that we do not need the inverted commas in the second sentence because indirect speech is no longer a quote. So we do not need these because this is not coming directly from the speaker's mouth. Also, we need to say she rather than I. The she there is still Jill, but we cannot say I because it is not coming directly from Jill's mouth, meaning this is a report of what Jill said. This is not exactly what Jill said. Jill said that she, meaning Jill, had good news. Here we see another difference between indirect and direct speech. In this case, we have a tense difference. Have from the direct quote becomes had in the indirect or reported sentence. This is because when the quote was said directly by Jill, it was in that present moment, thus being the present tense. When it was reported as indirect speech, this would mean that Jill said the statement sometime before. And we know when someone says something in the past, then you need the past tense. So the verb have from the direct quote becomes had in the indirect statement. This is a rule that you have to follow when changing any direct speech sentence to an indirect speech sentence. Remember that you are reporting what someone else has already said, so make sure that your verbs are in the past tense. Also, make sure that other changes necessary should also be included. For example, if I is in your quote, it should become she or he. If you have words like tomorrow, it should become the day after. If you have words like here, it should become there. These are a few examples of changes that need to be implemented when moving from a direct speech sentence to an indirect one. These will become comfortable for you when you practice them. Remember that just as quickly as you can move from direct to indirect speech, you can also move from indirect to direct. Just ensure that you apply the major changes, which are the tenses of your verbs, the subject pronouns, and of course, your punctuation. Once you have done this, you can be confident that you truly understand the difference and the application of direct and indirect speech. Thank you for choosing PTI BetterGradesFast.com.